Yes, hello to yet another episode of Source Talk, where we try to cover interesting stuff that is happening in the community, evolving around DeepIn. And today we have Prophet from MetaDAO, one of the founders, that is joining us, and we're going to dive a little bit into the decentralized autonomous organizations and the project MetaDAO, and also a concept called futarchy, which is super interesting. So welcome, Prophet.
Thanks for having me on. And that
Yeah,
intro is pretty cool. So you made that with AI?
yeah, it
Because
is
it
done with
had like
AI.
decentralized energy. Weird.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that was made some time ago, and I think the music AI generation services that are out there now is of better quality, so we might need to upgrade that song. But yeah, it's
Hmm.
quite cool that you can sort of make whatever music you want without being a musician, which I am truly not. So I just like listening to it. So yes,
Yep.
so it's not music that we're here to talk about, even though that's also fun to talk about. Could you just give you an introduction about yourself briefly?
Sure, yeah. So I'm Prophet. I'm a pseudonymous programmer who founded MetaDAO. Before, I used to work in ETH and yeah, left that to because I was really excited about this idea called futarchy, which was invented like almost 20, I think 25 years ago, by an economist named Robin Hanson, uh, where the idea is essentially to replace voters with markets, to like govern decisions with markets instead of like voters or this individual decision makers. And yeah, so I got really excited about that and started working on that on Solana about a year and a half ago. And yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah, and actually, I tried to sort of dive into that paper just before the talk now, and it's even 24 years ago, September 2000. So, so it's actually been around since quite some time, even like way before Bitcoin. Uh, so the concept of futarchy, which says something at least that like these ideas were out there even before we had the tools to make it happen.
Yeah. It's also crazy given that we're the first one to like truly try it. I'm not like fully sure why that's the case, but yeah, it's been around for a while, and there's been a lot of people that have like talked about it.
Yeah. So if we just look at like because this is might be a new concept for a lot of the listeners. So the concept futarchy, I tried to do some reading because it was a new concept for me as well. So DAOs have been like that. I think most people that are in the Web3 space know what a decentralized autonomous organization is, at least. But futarchy is more like the general concept of governance that like you could you dive into that concept a little bit more?
Sure, yeah. So futarchy, yeah, I mean, if you go to a traditional DAO, most of them are governed by simple token voting. So one token equals one vote, and then
Yeah,
you have some sort of quorum that needs to be met for a proposal to pass. And then, yeah, if more people vote pass than fail, then the proposal passes. And that has all these like problems with it. Like it's pretty easy to manipulate votes. Most people just go along with the team. Like most people aren't very informed. Um, and what futarchy is a new way of governing DAOs or organizations as a whole, where instead of voters, you have markets. So the simplest way I think to explain it is like imagine you have a proposal. Normally, people vote on whether a proposal should pass or fail, and if people vote more pass, then it passes, and if people vote more fail, then it fails. In a futarchy, people would speculate on what the value of the project's token would be if the
mm,
proposal were to pass and what it would be if it were to fail. And if number would go up, if it would pass, then the proposal automatically passes. And if number would go down if it passes, then or if the market speculates the number would go down, then it automatically fails. And so that's kind of like the high level.
So in some sorts, it's a speculation that where you try to sort of use the wisdom of the crowd, so to say, that are into the project to speculate on the future outcome of any kind of decision that is made. Is that sort of a general understanding? Is that correct? Or
Sure, yeah. I mean, I would say I wouldn't use that term specifically, just because I think generally crowds aren't very wise. Like mobs can form in crowds, right? Like people can just do stuff because other people are doing it. It's more leveraging the wisdom of markets. Like if there's a price moving event that happens right now, like as I say these words, that event, like it will be reflected in market prices within a few minutes, right? Because there are people all around the world that have all these capital trying to search out information and to incorporate that into market prices so they can make money. And so, yeah, I think using the wisdom of the markets is how I put it.
Yeah, wisdom of the market is, I agree that it actually might be a better way to sort of frame it. So if you go into, I mean, what's the biggest challenges of building something like this? Obviously, there is, as you said, there is already a service, like you have built a platform for this where you're, as I understand it, still sort of experimenting in some way. Could you tell me more about like the challenges that have been around making this idea happen? Like you started out like 2000, the general idea of us creating this kind of future decision making on the wisdom of markets. So what are the challenges, and why is this possible at this moment?
Yeah. Well, the challenges, I guess we can like split the time a little bit. So I think this has probably been possible since Ethereum, since like 2015. And it wasn't really possible before Ethereum, like between 2000 and 2015, because it'd be impossible to do this in like traditional capital markets, right? Like these are some pretty novel markets, and like you have to like go to NASDAQ and you'd have to go to the SEC or whatever local regulator you have and convince them all to like try this experiment and like write up the legal documents. And it'd be a massive pain in the ass. And you'd probably spend like $10 million on lawyers, and you may not even be guaranteed that you'd be allowed to try it. Public blockchain solved that problem. And some of the challenges that like why I think it hasn't been done so far, because there were like, well, one is just that it's a pretty new idea. And it's not like a small change, right? It's not, there are lots of improvements to voting. Like there's quadratic voting, there's voting with sortition, there's like lots of optimizations you can make. This isn't an optimization to voting. This is like a new system. And I think it takes people some time to wrap their mind around it. And then I think on like more technical challenges with futarchy, one of the issues that like we need to solve is that a lot of decisions don't have impact on market price, right? Like maybe you can make a decision like whether or not to fire the CEO with a market price, because that should actually impact like the value of a project or the value of a company.
Yeah.
But like if you want to decide whether or not to hire or fire like a product manager, I don't know if that's like a decision you can easily make through futarchy, but that's still a decision that needs to be made. And so, yeah, I would say that's a challenge. We're like working on ways uh, to fix that. Obviously, like we've kind of got to invent a solution. We're in kind of a greenfield here because there haven't been futarchies before. But yeah, I'd say that's a major like technical challenge.
But I mean, the technical challenge, I mean, you started with that it was probably very hard or not even possible to do before Ethereum was available. And you also mentioned Solana. I guess that just transaction fees and speed makes this also easier to do.
Sure.
It's no, I would say, no secret that I'm also, I would say, bullish on Solana. By the way, we're building our project on
Nice.
that. So yeah.
Nice. Well, you got the hat to match.
Exactly. So I try to at least show where I stand in this field. So I would say that you are now, like, if we go to the platform and you say that there aren't really, so maybe we could just dive into that. So we have these DAOs, like you have a token, you have a governance token, you're able to sort of take decisions in a decentralized organization. So, and the futarchy way, like, I would say, could we in some way describe this? What's the difference from the end user? If you're participating in a project that is governed by a DAO or a futarchy, what is what sort of the main difference from the end user, like me as a member or some kind of stakeholder in the project?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so the main difference is that you won't be like when you're voting. Well, a lot of the time you're not voting. So, like in a traditional DAO, you'll probably get all these like you'll see these things on Twitter like, "Oh, please go vote in our governance proposals," and you're like, not really worth my time. I have better things to do.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about futarchy is that you actually like don't really have to trade. Uh, like the as long as the prices of the market are like efficient, so like there's enough people that like if the prices diverge from reality. So like say there's a proposal that would be really bad, and yet the market is currently speculating that the price of the token, if it were to pass, would be the same as the spot price of the token, even though it would like destroy the value of the token. You're incentivized to go sell in that market because you can make money by like selling and then buying at a later price once it dumps if it passes. Um, and so you need like some people to go in and trade against the market price. But
Yeah.
one key difference is that you don't have to. Like you don't have to be that person, which I think is like pretty crucial because a lot of people don't have a lot of information on what the projects are doing, and they're not like an expert, so they can kind of just say like, I'm not going to participate, but I know that someone else who's smarter than me is going to be trading against the market price and my interests are going to be taken care of.
Yeah.
If you do want to trade, like if you do want to become a participant in the futarchy DAO, yeah, it looks different. So instead of like casting a vote for something, there are just two markets for every proposal. There's a pass market where you speculate on what the value of the token would be if the proposal were to pass, and then there's a fail market, and you speculate on what the value of the proposal would be if it were to fail. And then yeah, you just place trades in these markets. And the way that we like to have these the way these markets work is that like uh, the way it works where you can speculate on what the value of something would be is that that market is only finalized if the thing actually comes to pass. So if you like buy, let's just say, Meta in the pass market of a given proposal, you think it's like bullish if it were to pass, but then the proposal doesn't pass, then your trade is like reverted. So you get back your original USDC that you like put
Yeah.
in to buy. And so, yeah, I would say that is like at a high level, the big distinction is you're trading and not voting.
Yeah. So in some way, this is like an evolution of the current DAOs that we have now. That this will be. I mean, I agree that. I mean, a lot of the times like you vote on projects. I think that we've seen now that we can go back and see what's happening in the Solana space just quite recently with Jupiter, where a lot of projects are like you have this Jupiter governance token, and people are able to vote on different decisions. And I agree that most people are probably just voting to sort of guess. In some way, they vote because they take a bet on the project itself, but they don't take a bet on value, it's sort of hard to make that decision, I guess. So if we take an example, let's say that we talk about the Jupiter project. I guess you're quite aware of that. I guess that everyone in the space sort of knows about that. If they were to implement like a futarchy instead of the governance model that they're using now, how would that look like?
Yeah. So I guess the main thing that JupeDAO governs right now is the LFG launchpad. So like,
Yeah.
Srcful, for example, was a project where they came and they announced themselves, and then they got people who own Jupe to vote for them, and then they got approved. And that's kind of like a semi-weak constraint if you can get people to vote for you, because people can vote for you for like all sorts of reasons. I think in Sharky's case, and with a lot of the cases here, like people are just voting because they expect to get an airdrop from the project that they're voting for, as opposed to saying like, "Oh, this is going to be good for Jupiter." In a futarchy, the way it would work is you would speculate on what the value of Jupe would be if like a given project launch on Jupe Launchpad, which like that should actually have an impact on the price, right? Or at least on the value. Like if a really crappy project launches on Jupe Launchpad and then like it rugs, that's not going to look good for Jupe, and that's going to make the Launchpad inherently like less valuable, and it's going to cause fewer people to come back. And so, yeah, you would imagine that the value of Jupe would be different in those two cases. And the constraint would be that the value, like you would have to essentially add value to Jupe, or the market would have to deem that you would add value to Jupe by launching on Jupiter, which is like, yeah, tougher constraint, higher bar to surpass.
So in that case, you would sort of speculate more on, I would say, the value of the project, which in this case would be Jupe, and the outcome of like you're actually. I agree that I think that we actually were part of of the launchpad as a project. We didn't make it, and we didn't also make any promises of airdrops, which might have influenced the outcome as well. We don't want to sort of buy voters in that place. So that would make sense, I would say, from my perspective at least. You would get a more fair voting, I guess. It would be less short term, even though, because it would be the long time success of the project rather than just getting an airdrop here right now.
Right.
So if we go into and dive into what you've been building, like, could you tell me more about the MetaDAO, like the project? So which phase are you in, and why, like, do you have any interesting projects ongoing, and so on?
Sure, yeah. So I'd say we're very early. We launched in November of 2023, so actually exactly 201 days ago. The goal was to build the first DAO governed by futarchy and kind of see what happens. So we started by actually, it's kind of funny talking about buying votes in the Launchpad. So we started out by building a product that allowed people to trade, or allows, it's live, people to trade their votes for money. It's specifically used in Saber, so like the stable swap AMM on Solana, where you have these like Saber tokens, and they dictate where emissions go. So basically, they dictate like what APY is on various pools. And so the projects that have a stable coin like UXD or Soulblaze or Marinade or like any of these other things that have pools and stable swap want to have liquidity in their token. And so the theory was like they'll bribe or they'll buy votes so that they can like raise the emission of their pools. But like we launched that, but I think our focus shifted pretty. There were a bunch of people that were essentially asking us, "Why don't you build this as a service? Like, why don't you let me launch my own futarchy? And eventually we kind of caved, and we were like, okay, we got to listen to what the market is telling us, because that's like more likely where the opportunity lies. And so, yeah, we started building like futarchy as a service, or like a futarchy protocol that would allow other DAOs um, to use futarchy. And so we actually are launched, like currently in the process of launching. So we just did our first proposal in the new system as kind of like a test, and then over the next week we're going to be onboarding I believe 4 DAOs in the Solana ecosystem to futarchy, and they'll like start running some proposals through futarchy.
Mhm.
It'll be kind of like a realms, just like a DAO interface where you can trade proposals and where DAOs can like create futarchies.
Yeah. But I mean, the problems I think with I would say with DAOs that could be a problem is that like if you have a very high share amount of voting power for a very like few players, and that it's actually hard to make any real difference as like as an individual with that doesn't have that much high stake in a project. So in this way, like in the futarchy way, you could sort of, as you say, that you could sort of rely on that if these, I would say, big players speculate on something that they have inside information or probably are more knowledgeable about, it's probably a good way for me as well, I guess.
Hmm.
I'm not
I
sure if
mean,
this is. I mean, I'm
unless
trying to also grasp the concept of the differences, but it's more about the speculative and also more about the project itself, and that drives the value. And then you also speculate on I would say the market price rather than just voting on a decision.
right.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think like a key difference here is that a user may not even be trading in a futarchy because they want to have an influence. Actually, like the ironic part is, as a trader, you want to have as little influence as possible, right? You want to minimize your price impact because that's what gives you the best execution price. And so traders are actually trying to have as little influence on the proposal as possible, at least if they're rational, which not everyone is, but
Mm.
like over time, people will probably become more rational. And your goal, as no matter whether you're big or small, is just to make money. It's just to like beat market returns. Um, and so, yeah, that's the kind of nice part is like you don't really care about if whales are going to like be bidding bigger than you. You just care about like what percentage ROI you can make.
Yeah. So in some sense, this is where like DeFi meets governance, or could that also be a wrap up of like the concept, or?
Yeah, someone has like within our community has been trying to get me to call it GovFi, which like I don't know, it doesn't like speak to me, but maybe that's like the best way to encapsulate it.
Yeah. It's for sure an interesting, I would say, idea, and I do believe that this might actually be, I would say, a really effective way of doing things. And in some way, I mean, it's also speaks to what like I would say the wisdom of markets, if you say so. I mean, that's essentially what the stock market is. That you're trying to price in the decision making and what's happening in companies, whatever. So in some way, that's already built into the system, but this will be a more effective way of participating. Um, if we're
Right.
not talking about speculative like prices of, like if we just talk about organizations as a whole, let's say if I think this, I would say the values that are at least proposed in the paper of Robin Hansson, it's not only about speculative like prices on a project. It's also about that what's the best outcome for the project in some way. So could this be translated into, I would say, governance that is not, I would say, priced? Do you understand what I'm after?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think in some ways yes, and in some ways no. So it can't be used for governance that isn't priced, but it can be. But there are lots of organizations that you wouldn't think of as being able to be priced, but that actually can. So, like for example, a national government, like national governments, obviously don't have stock prices. They don't have like a goal to increase value for shareholders, but they do kind of have an implicit goal or explicit to increase welfare of their citizens.
Yeah.
And that's not something that's like, I mean, you can kind of measure it in some ways. Like one way is GDP per capita. Another way is just like subjective well-being. Like you could give everyone in your country, instead of having them vote every year, every 4 years, or every 2 years, you could give them a quiz every year and say like, how happy are you? Like, how satisfied are you with your life on a scale of 1 to 10? And then you can create financial contracts that pay out relative to whatever your metric that you're trying to optimize, whether that's GDP or happiness. So yeah, like the way it would work is essentially, yeah, I don't know, maybe your example stand, and you want to maximize the welfare of example standees. So every example standee every year would take a quiz where they rank from like 0 to 5 how well they're doing, how satisfied they are with their life, and then financial contracts. So yeah, example standee coin would pay out relative to that. So if people on average reported like a 3.4 out of 5 in happiness, then it would pay out $3.40. Or five out of 5 would pay out $5. And then people would speculate on how individual decisions would affect the value of example standing coin. So it's essentially they would be trying to figure out how individual decisions would affect the welfare of example standees in the next year, and whether they're going to improve their life or make them worse. And so, yeah, I think like actually one I don't want to actually, maybe I shouldn't say that specific project, but I'll say there is a project that wants to work with us that doesn't want to use token price, or like can't legally use token price. And so what we think we're going to do for them is run a futarchy on kind of like this more subjective uh, thing where like you get people, whether they be the community or whether they be project people working for the project, to rank like how effective the grants program was, and then you pay out contracts relative to like how satisfied they were.
Yeah.
And then
And that's an interesting point you made, which I think also applies for, at least in my belief, that for a lot of deep-in projects that when you work with utility token, you work with like infrastructure, and you actually have a token that is supposed to be the means to solve something rather than to be an asset that you can like buy and sell for speculative purposes. Obviously, things
sure.
can happen at the same time, but it's also about regulatory issues. Like if you create a speculative market and you're like open with that, okay, you speculate on our price, that might be a problem. So, and I think that would be a problem for our project, for instance. We absolutely don't speculate on price at all for the token, and we should not. It's a means for being able to do what we want to do in an effective way, like a utility token rather than an asset.
Sure.
So
Well, what would you say are like? Would you say there's a KPI or like a specific metric that accurately encapsulates like how successful the project is going? Like I don't know, revenue
yeah, I
or
think that
demands.
I think for deep in projects in general, I think you would be able to get those metrics quite easy in other ways, because you're still working with measurable things. So for instance, it could be the number of sites that you have connected. It could be the demand side, that you will obviously get a number on the amount of demand that you have for the services that the network is providing, without this being like it's still a speculation on what the future of the demand, but you're not speculating on on a token. You're speculating on like the growth of the project, or so to say. So I think that would definitely be possible to do it for deep in projects without actually speculating on the value of the token. That's at least my like very short thinking at this moment. But I would say this is some of the problem. I think that if you're in the DeFi sector, I mean, if you launch a meme coin or whatever, it's all about just the price of the token. That's sort of the measure of success. But in
Right.
a deep in project, it's something different. The token is a way to sort of make the transactions work effectively, and the token itself should be something that sort of is used for the different terms of services that the project is trying to solve, rather than a speculative asset. And I know that, I
Sure,
mean,
yeah.
there is gray scales here, and I mean, it's permissionless, and so whatever can be done is done anyhow. But I think this I think is very, very important for any kind of deep in project that is regulated by some kind of authority, at least in the US and in Europe, that you need to be very, very careful about what the token is used for, and the purpose of the token. But
Yeah, that makes sense.
I believe that, I mean, if you're able to measure things that aren't the I would say the value of the token, that you could also argue that the value of the token might be affected of the success of other metrics, but that's up to sort of the that's an indirect information in that sense, in that case. So
Right.
If we go back, I mean, you talked about you have some projects ongoing, and like what's in the roadmap for like in the next 1 or 2 years, or I'm not sure what the roadmap looks for you, but what do you think is happening? Are more and more projects going over to this kind of governance model, or is it still like very early and people haven't heard about it before, and you're sort of just preaching now and trying to change things, or what's the current status?
I think that there are a lot of Solana projects that are looking on curiously. And there have been a few, obviously, because we're launching with 4, that have been like, okay, this is already worth trying. And there's a lot more that are like, this is a new system. I don't know if we want to migrate all of our like treasury and everything over to this until it's proven yet. So let's kind of wait and see. And so I think my midterm goal, like next, I don't know, call it 3 to 6 months, is to prove that the model like works, that it can effectively manage your project or like anyone's project. And then after that, it would just be like getting almost every single Solana DeFi DAO or like any DAO that would be on Solana to be using futarchy, and I think it should, like, once we can prove that it works, it should hopefully be an easy-ish sell. Obviously, like, it will take work to migrate over if someone's already in another DAO system, and so that like is one constraint. But I think everyone in crypto more broadly kind of understands how much governance sucks today. Like, it's kind of a meme at this point, like governance theater, just like all the shenanigans that happens. I don't know, like the bankless people raising like $1 million proposal, the Arbitrum DAO or whatever, to like produce a few YouTube videos. And yeah, I think like everyone is kind of aware that governance is broken. Some have already kind of started to believe that this is the way forward, and some are more like cautious. And yeah, the goal is to prove that it works and to flip some of the semi-believers into full futards, which is what we like call ourselves.
That's a cool name. So what are the main criticisms for that you have encountered so far for this kind of I would say concept and idea?
I would say a major one is that this isn't like we've a lot of projects historically that have been in the DAO space have preached community governance. The idea that like your project should be governed by the community and everyone should have a say in the future of your project. That isn't really how markets work. Like markets are just trying to incorporate information and don't really give a shit about your opinion. They are like, if you are consistently wrong, like you can have an opinion, but if you're consistently wrong, you're going to lose money in the market and you're going to have less sway over the future markets. And so I think that's like when we were I, for example, was in the Jupiter Discord talking to some people about futarchy, and someone was, yeah, like this is totally antithetical to community governance. Like we should never do anything like this. This is like terrible. So that's one pushback. Um, and then, yeah, I mean, there are like more technical pushbacks, like yeah, specifics around how we actually implement like futarchy. And those I'm like not really super worried about because if we do run into issues, we can just like create a solution, right? Those are like engineering problems, not science
Yeah.
problems. But yeah, I would say that's like a major pushback. And then yeah, a lot of people don't. I mean, especially in crypto, I would say crypto is probably the most inefficient market in the world in terms of like you have lots of Keynesian BD contests going on, like meme coins, for example.
Yeah.
People are not buying meme coins because they believe that the meme coins are going to produce a lot of free cash flows into the future. They're buying them because they think an idiot is going to buy them from them at a later at a higher price. Uh, and that's an issue with markets is Keynesian BD contests, and um, that's like a concern. I think. I also think I tend to bucket that as well into like engineering problem. Like there are ways to make markets less like that. Like you could, for example, make trades not settle until like sometime into the future. Because if someone is buying something and then they know they can sell it tomorrow to an idiot, like that's probably a different dynamic than if they know they have to sit on it for like 3 to 6 months before they can
Yeah.
sell it again. Um, but yeah, I would say like that's a big one. Like traditional markets though are not nearly this crazy. Like if you go to the problem is just that most markets are so boring. Like no one is looking at the commercial paper market. Like no one is looking at that other than the people who are actually trading it or like yeah investing in it. And so we don't really like see that okay, here is a situation where like assets are actually valued pretty much on cash flows. And if you like have an asset that starts looking worse for cash flows, it goes down. And if it starts looking better, it goes up. Um, but yeah, crypto's not like that. So that's like one pushback as well.
Yeah. So you covered a lot of my other question about like the biggest misconceptions. Like, but if we just cover that area, so what the biggest misconceptions about futarchy that you have encountered, like, is is what?
Um, that's a good question. I think I don't. I actually don't know. I think we don't get a lot of misconceptions. It's just it takes a lot of time for people to get it, and then once they do, they like fully get it. It was like that for me
Yeah.
too. Like it didn't. Yeah, I was working on it for like a year, right? But it didn't fully click until I'd actually traded in the first markets that we ran on MetaDAO. Like you just kind of have to do it. It takes like yeah, 15 to 20 minutes, and then you've like made a trade, and you're like, oh wait, so if I'm wrong. Like if the token goes down, then I lose money, and if it goes up, or like I traded in the wrong direction, then I lose money. If I traded in the right direction, then I make money. Oh, okay, that's kind of interesting. And now it like clicks. So I think that's maybe one. And then but I would say the earlier thing of like community governance. That this is actually what I would say is the biggest misconception is people are like, wait, so this is basically just like voting by whales because this is just voting with money. Like the more money you have, the more say you have in the market, which like seems worse than voting, right? It just seems like more corrupted voting. I think that's just like not how markets operate. Like markets have inherent dynamics in them that don't like prevent manipulation, but at least make it harder than voting, right? Like there are professional people that make all their money by if you try to trade in a market to manipulate a price, like if you're a whale who comes in to try to like bid up, not because you think it's more valuable, but because you just want to get a proposal to pass, you're a noise trader. You're trading on information other than alpha you have about the value of the asset. And in traditional markets, there are firms that make all their money by trading against noise traders. Like Renaissance, actually, the founder just died like a month ago, but they made like huge returns. I think like 60% average returns over like the 40 years of the fund. And their main strategy was statistical arbitrage, where they just tried to like identify places where there were noise traders and then like trade in the opposite direction because that's how they like could make money. And so, I think it's like harder to manipulate markets than someone might intuit, especially in crypto.
Yeah, okay. So that's really interesting, actually, to dive into this subject. And I can just speak for myself that this is, for me, a new concept, and I've definitely learned a lot. And I will definitely also check in and maybe try to understand more of how this is working, as you said. Maybe we'll understand it when you start actually doing a trade yourself and to get the concept. But if you want to participate, if you're a project today and like, okay, this seems like a neat idea, I would like to learn more and participate, where do you start?
Yeah, so if you want to trade proposal markets, you can go to futarchy.metadao.fi. Like today, there's a proposal live for our DAO. And then in a few days, there'll be some other proposals for other DAOs going live. And then if you want to onboard to futarchy, you can reach out to me. I'm MetaProfit with a 3 on all channels, or you can reach out to Nalik, who's like the co-founder of MetaDAO, who's MetaNalik on all channels. And like right now, it's kind of like a whitelisted process just because we want to make sure that everything is working. Eventually it'll be self-service. You'll just be able to go in and like create a futarchy in like 15 minutes. So that'll be cool. But yeah, today, if you want to create a DAO, reach out to us. And if you want to trade, just go to the website and trade.
Looks like a really like interesting future we have in ahead of us in this space with new kind of governance that is evolving. So I'm super hyped about seeing more projects actually implementing this model, because I do believe that you're solving something that needs to be, I would say, better than it is now. So is there anything else that you want to add to this conversation before we wrap it up, or?
I don't think there's anything I'd like to add, but I think you had some good questions. Like we covered kind of all the nitty-gritty of futarchy. So yeah, thanks for that, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So we'll listen to some AI-generated music. Please just stay put, and I'll end the recording right after. So
sounds good.
Thank you very much, Prophet.
Thank you.